Cole,
Yep.
obviously very disappointing game, very disappointing result. What was the area of the game that you felt was the most disappointing from your point of view?
Oof, there was a few, so I can't really say one. I mean, to start off, we were sloppy on the ball. Didn't come out with the right energy. Basically, our whole idea of how we wanted to hurt these guys, we didn't ever really get to that point. We wanted to get in behind them and expose their high line. We rarely did that. We rarely hit them in transition. There was a lot of things that we talked about before the game that we just didn't do in the game. And sometimes that's MLS for you. You look at them last week. They had a rough game against Seattle. We played well versus Columbus. It changes game to game. But if we really want to be a top team in this league and kind of take ourselves to the next level, I think the away games are huge for us to not feel away. We need to get comfortable being away from home and put on the same performances that we do at Providence.
And then also you had a tribute video shown on the big screen while you were warming up. You acknowledged the crowd. Just how did it feel to be back in Colorado for the first time and playing for a different team?
Weird. Yeah, just because it happened so quick, 4 weeks ago you're in preseason with them and then you're traded here. And I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, it was a weird moment because, all those guys, I've spent so much time there. It's not like you're there for 2 years and then leave, 7 years. You create really good friendships, and a lot of those guys are my best friends. So it's definitely tough going against them. But at the end of the day, I felt like when I step over that line, friends go away for 90 minutes, and I was trying not to talk to any of them, acknowledge, what was going on. Really just trying to win for Portland, and, it didn't happen today.
All right, we're going to move on to online questions. Sam Sviller, go ahead.
Hey, Cole. Disappointing results. Phil was in here earlier talking about how this game, being away from Providence Park, was kind of a test that he felt that you guys failed. In your eyes, what's some of the solutions to performing better on the road when, you're away from kind of that energetic environment of Providence Park? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a few things. I think managing the game better, putting our authority on the game of what makes us good. I've always thought MLS is one of the toughest leagues to go away from home because of the travel and the differences in climate and stuff like that. But for me, there shouldn't be any difference going away from home than being at home. At home, obviously, you have the love of your family and the fans, but away from home, you should still mimic the same style that you're playing at home. And to me, I don't feel like we looked like the Portland Timbers today. So, I think we all know when we're at our best last week, what that consists of, and we need to bring that out every single time we're away from home.
Sam, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just a little bit specifically about kind of your role in the midfield today. I know you said you wanted to try to exploit spaces in behind. What were you trying to, what were you seeking to do to kind of play off of Felipe Mora, kind of dropping into kind of like that number 10 spot? What did you kind of view as your role to try to spring those players in behind? Thanks.
Yeah. In the first half, going into the game, we wanted to be able to draw their wingers out, so create a 3 and a 1 with me dropping to the side on the left side and hopefully draw their winger out. They kind of, they either knew that was coming or the way that they addressed it didn't go to how we wanted to, where they had Paxton Aronson come out to deal with me, so their winger just dropped. And then eventually there was no overload and no space in behind because we didn't ever really have runners in behind to exploit that space. So that was in the first half. Once we saw that, at halftime we made changes. The coaches came in and wanted Jimmer to be that 3 and then, put me higher in the pocket. And in those moments it was just trying to run into the space when Christoph got the ball and, play off Pipe and Kevin Engage. But, there just wasn't enough moments today where we looked like ourselves.
We're going to jump here to Alex Barnes. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, Cole. You mentioned last week the team being at their best in terms of their performance. I'm just curious, when a performance looks so drastically different the next week, how do you as an individual and as a team reconcile that fact?
You can never really get too high and too low in this league. After last week, you can't get too high and think, oh, well, we just beat Columbus, one of the best teams in the league. Over the last few years, we're a top team. I think every single week you need to have the same mentality, regardless of win or draw. But obviously, when you play like we did today and it wasn't great, that adds a little bit of fuel going into next week. And we all said, these days off that we have, I think we're going to all be coming in and training a little extra and making sure we're on top of it so that come Tuesday we're ready to go as a group and be ready for Vancouver.
Follow-up question, Alex?
Yeah, does the fact that the next game is against Vancouver help matters in trying to put the result from today right?
You know, it probably will. We haven't obviously thought about Vancouver until right now, so I know that's a big game for Cascadia Cup purposes, and you know, a rival of ours. So we'll be looking to bounce back after this one. But honestly, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. You know, after tonight's result, I think we definitely want to bounce back in any way we can.